Hello, Jon Lee. So nice to have you. Let me just say a few words about you because, because we have an audience who doesn't know you as well as I do. This is Jon Lee, who is a psychotherapist from Oakland, California, and who is is an expert in many things. I refer to you as a trauma therapist, as a TIST therapist, and you're obviously a TIST facilitator. Um, and I always think of you if I'm thinking about my trans clients or my autistic clients. So uh, Jon has these areas of expertise, and I thought talking to him would be just the thing to help us serve our trans and autistic clients better.
Mm. Thank you so much, Janina. That's such a huge, huge honor, and you've been such a huge part in getting me here personally and clinically.
Good.
Yeah. Just a quick note, my pronouns are they, them, but also I totally understand like the kind of programming around binary pronouns runs really, really deep. So I'm totally okay if you end up saying he, him, but just for the listeners, especially, my pronouns are they, them.
Right. I did not was not a good role model.
I get it. It's like more time kind of using more binary pronouns. It's more undoing that's needed.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
But my granddaughters use they, them pronouns, so better, I better get better.
It's ongoing work. I get it.
Yeah. So I, of course, and I'm sure every one of our listeners has been feeling a sense of alarm for the trans community under the current um, political and social climate. And it's scary to me on behalf of, of our trans community. And so I was wondering what it's like. It's one thing to do therapy with people who have had past trauma, different than doing therapy with people who are under threat right this minute.
Totally, totally. Yeah, yeah. I have a lot of fear too. I have a lot of grief too. And even though I myself don't identify as trans, I identify as non-binary and queer, but I have a lot of trans loved ones. So yeah, it's been hard to show up and hold space when I myself am holding so much as well.
Right, right. And I think says a lot about the general ignorance in the population is that queer and non-binary are under the umbrella of trans. So
Right.
when when Trump says, you know, trans people uh, are
Yeah.
going to be eliminated from this sector of our society, he's not saying, but non-binary will be fine.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's just no space for nuance because there really is so much nuance when it comes to gender. Like trans people can be non-binary, but not all non-binary people identify as trans. And there's all of this is so important to people's lived experience, but there's just no room for that.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And even, even the sensitivity to pronouns. Um, my first trans client um, wanted to be called she because she had waited 40 years to be called she.
Mm.
So it actually meant a lot to her. Um, as much as it would mean today to call someone they.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I found like so much of this work is it involves like really examining and unlearning the deep programming in us to assume based on appearance. And it's so important to build a new practice and habit of checking with people, like how they identify, how they want to be perceived, and believing them.
Right, 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 exactly. Instead of putting them into the categories that we're implicitly biased to
Mhm,
put them
mhm. Imposing upon them based on this deep programming, this binary programming. Yeah, yeah. Can say a bit about the question about supporting people when the threats are ongoing, because it's such a hard and complex experience to navigate in therapy because the threats are very real and they're ongoing and they're escalating at such an alarming rate. And I'm often needing to wrestle with the truth that like individual therapy can't resolve the suffering from systemic oppression because systemic oppression is ongoing. And as long as it's ongoing, people are going to be harmed and re-traumatized. But I first try to stay really grounded in that truth because that keeps me in a stance where I can hold more space for all that's present with my clients, especially when they're going through such huge existential dilemmas. And if I'm not grounded in that truth, my helper part can get the best of me.
in.
And my helper part freaks out if they believe I'm not helping a client feel better or if I'm not helpful enough. But that's redirecting my attention away from what's present with my client and towards helping parts of me feel better. So I really don't want that to happen. Like everything that's coming up from my clients deserves to be held and affirmed. So that's kind of the first thing I really try to keep in mind.
Right, which is so important. I think especially in these days when therapists have been trained in so many approaches that are skills-based or can be used in a
Exactly.
skills-based way. And so, so,
Exactly.
so I hear therapists talking about teaching skills in the first visit. And
Mm.
I'm thinking, but this is just hello.
Right. I've been there before. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and you're right, it totally comes from that that wanting to help.
Mhm. And the helper having a hard time tolerating the just how uncomfortable it is to not be able to resolve this for someone. And that discomfort is so felt, and the helper just so wants to like douse it in water.
Oh, right. And to say it's gonna get better. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah, right, right. But I have to keep reminding myself, like when this is all ongoing and it's so existential and complex, like people need connection in this energetic field that transmits something like, I really get it. I'm really here with you. I can really situate this in a larger context.
Right.
It's all valid and so understandable.
Right. And I think, you know, it wasn't it wasn't that safe before. And now it's really, really scary.
Totally, totally. Yeah. And in addition to affirming and holding, like I do want to share with listeners that sometimes there really are some practical needs to
Mhm.
address. like mutual aid is often one thing I think about. And for listeners who aren't familiar with that term, it's when on a community level, people come together and organize to meet some immediate needs in a really decentralized way and outside of institutions and services. Um, I also think about community because I've seen again and again the clients who have more community just have it makes a big difference when it comes to
Oh,
resilience. And so if someone's really lacking community, it's something that feels kind of like a priority. And some ideas come to mind to share with listeners, like if someone's kind of having a hard time accessing that, I think maybe a place to start could be support groups or maybe a local LGBTQ plus center. And even if that is limited based on location, then maybe an online forum or social media. But community makes mutual aid more possible too. And it just widens the field of support and connection.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a blessing that we have the option of online and social media communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm in Oakland, which is like way more like progressive and um I just think about how some listeners are probably in some really red states where resources are way more limited. Um, spaces are under way more legislative attack and threat.
Mhm.
So yeah, online spaces could be potentially really life-saving for people in those areas.
Right, right, right. And when you say offering services, what kinds of services do you mean?
Oh, which part about services?
You said being able to offer services outside of institutional settings.
Oh, mutual aid is about meeting needs outside of services, outside of institutions. So it can be kind of like on social media, someone will put out a call and say, hey, I'm in need of funds to get out of this really conservative area that I'm in. I've been stuck for a long time. My family's not supportive, and maybe they'll have like a fundraising campaign and that gets shared through different networks online. People are just spreading the word. There's also forms of that where it's more organized. Maybe someone locally is gathering a spreadsheet or a database of different people putting out calls for support. Um,
Great.
mhm,
That's very cool.
mhm,
Very cool. Yes.
yeah,
And again, taking advantage of the fact that we have online resources.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that has kind of become more of a common practice since COVID, since, oh, well, we're still in COVID, but since lockdown.
Right.
Yeah, when people would just recognize like we can't rely on government assistance and institutions right now. Like we just have to come together and have each other's back.
Right. 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 Yes. I love it. Yes. And I know that your other of your many areas of expertise is autism. And that is, I would say, probably 30% of the questions I get wherever I'm speaking are about autism. And I think there's an eagerness to know more about autism and especially um, to help therapists overcome certain stereotypes. Like the typical stereotype I hear is this client is not related, therefore they must be autistic.
Mhm,
I'm
mhm, mhm,
like,
mhm.
Well, there are actually a lot of things that it could account for somebody not being related.
Totally.
Let's
Hmm.
let's just be a little careful. Or someone, a client, is having difficulty accessing emotion,
Yeah.
and the assumption is they must be autistic.
Yeah. Totally, totally.
Yeah,
That is such a big stereotype, and it's so harmful because autistic people really do feel a lot often. And yeah,
yeah,
there are autistic folks who have what's called alexithymia, so they're not able to kind of sense the interoceptive like data about emotions, but that's not everybody, and that also doesn't mean they don't have access to emotions either.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, it's often that they're overwhelmed by their emotions, not that they don't have them.
Yeah, totally. Totally. That can absolutely be the case. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I found that like, well, from my experience personally, I've found that I am autistic through a neuropsych assessment, and it's already become a special interest of mine. And I've just been like diving head in to like consuming everything I can about like autistic experiences and traits. But that's kind of taught me like if people can get really familiar with the different ways it can um influence somebody's like attention or interests or bodily experiences or communication and social tendencies, the ways they go about understanding things, like all the different ways that can manifest, then maybe people will be able to have a more global sense of does this kind of fit for this client instead of just zeroing in on certain tendencies and being like, oh, based on the stereotypes I know, that must be, it could possibly be autism. People might be more able to have a global kind of holistic feel of it.
Right. And and I think you also imply a really important point, which is that autism may affect the same brain areas in everyone, but the how it manifests is so different person to person.
Exactly. Person to person and context to context too.
Right.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So, um, could could you is I don't know this if this is difficult. What are some of the things that alert you to the possibility that your client might be autistic?
Totally, totally. Like, I think for me, because like I said earlier, I totally geeked out about this, and I kind of have a good amount of data about how it could present. Nowadays, I kind of get a vibe from people, and sometimes that vibe comes from like a more holistic sense of what how I experience the person. It could be a combination of like the way a conversation flows with them, how the interactions kind of feel to me. It could be more concrete things too, like their level of eye contact or the way they use their body, maybe the style of communication, if it tends to be more concrete. And then there's also themes that alert me too. Like maybe there's themes that keep coming up around like being often misunderstood or communications often get misinterpreted. Or they might talk about themes from all throughout their life, but especially early on of like always feeling like an outsider, always feeling really different. Autistic people tend to be especially susceptible to bullying as well. So if
Right.
something alerts me, I first kind of check it out. Like, does it line up with other things that could align with an autistic experience? Um, because I try not to jump ahead just from one thing that alerts me. I try to see if other things kind of fit. And then I kind of use my clinical judgment. Like, could it be helpful to explore this a little bit more with this person based on the work we're doing? And I always check with the client. And of course, I give them the caveat, like I can't diagnose with my scope, but I can assist with the inquiry. And this might be a process towards less self-blame, more self-acceptance,
Right,
maybe some creative strategies to get some needs met.
right, right. This might be a way of understanding why you've been struggling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah. And also, I remember, I mean, my first job way back before you were born
Mm-hmm.
was working in a preschool for autistic children. And it was such a wonderful education. They were very low functioning children. Most of them didn't have language, um, but I just it was so. I mean, it was very challenging, but wonderful to see that they could connect if we could meet them at their level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And 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 if we couldn't, then then we were in a power struggle with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I remember I brought my own my I had kids the same age as my students. So I brought my kids to recess at the school when there was a school vacation or something. And it was wonderful to see my children playing
Mm-hmm.
with the kids, and the kids could play
Mm-hmm.
with another child who could play.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't play with each other
Mm-hmm.
because they were missing. They were, well, first of all, they were really preoccupied with all the things that were going on in their minds.
Yeah.
And also um the way I've always explained it, so I'm saying this not to be right, but to be corrected,
Mm-hmm.
was that because social cues and human interaction are so overstimulating, they couldn't process
Mm-hmm.
social
Mm-hmm.
situations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And but but when they were with a child who could play with them, ready to play.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was so cute. My children, who are again older than you are, they remember to this day their visit to
Mm-hmm.
the school.
Mm-hmm.
It was they really
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I I always think that one of the problems that therapists have with autistic clients is that the therapist is trying to do what they do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And the
absolutely.
client may or may not be able to do it with them.
Absolutely. Uh-huh.
And and how do we then help therapists modify
Mm-hmm.
their approach,
Yeah, totally.
right?
Totally. Totally.
Because if it doesn't work to say, and how does that make you feel? Then maybe that's not a good question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it definitely reminds me of someone I work with, where that question just doesn't quite work with it. Yeah, so we've had to kind of collaborate with like how we go about uh identifying what's happening inside.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, absolutely. I can really see what you're saying about the social cues being stimulating. It makes me wonder too about like other sensory sensitivities that are like uh their sensory needs may not be met in when they're in the classroom, but when they're playing outside, maybe they're it's less kind of overstimulated could be another thing.
Right.
Yeah, and kind of, yeah, what you're saying really there's a lot of parallels here with like the therapy space when it's not sensitive to different access needs and sensory needs. And there might be this kind of replication of neurotypical expectations on people. And then
Right.
therapy just becomes yet another space where people have to kind of muscle through the hour and mask to assimilate. And it's exhausting for people.
Right. So say more about masking because um that's one of the things I've been curious about. If it's hard to process social cues, how do you know how to mask?
Mm, I think there's a few things that come to mind, like it's often reinforced through explicit and implicit neurotypical expectations that are just everywhere, like in the family and school, among peers, like culturally in media, and we're just all exposed to this from day one. And
And
so
then what kinds of expectations?
how one moves through the world, how one quote unquote should be interacting with people, what could lead to more rejection and alienation among peers for being too different or weird. So it's all kind of like it's all adaptation, and much of it is unconscious. It's
Right.
survival to be more acceptable, to kind of assimilate and not stick out so much because, like I was saying earlier, like autistic kids are often bullied for being kind of different or odd.
Right.
So it is a way to kind of try to stay safer. And like so many trauma related adaptations, a lot of it is unconscious and it's just driven by an instinct to be safer.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I think in some ways we could apply the concept to all children because all children, hopefully, you know, hopefully there are children who don't have to adapt so much.
Mhm,
I think, even my grandchildren who were raised in a very safe family environment, there were still expectations.
mhm,
Now, their parents are artists.
mhm,
There was an expectation, that comes out in their parents are more excited about their artwork than about, you know, other things than their blocks.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
And so they start to see,
mhm,
oh, if I'm being creative, there's more love and approval.
mhm, mhm. Right, right. Yeah, yeah. And then this is also reinforced like just on a kind of structural, systematic level, like at school, for example, like you have to, like autistic kids, unless their autism is identified early on and they're in a different learning setting, but like in a more typical classroom, they're going to have to force themselves to adapt to the pace of the learning, like the style of the learning. So that's another way that like neurotypical expectations kind of force them to adapt.
Right. Which has been seen, I think, for a long time as necessary.
Mhm,
Right.
mhm. Yeah, so what you said does remind me, like, yeah, masking can be, um, in some ways, a really universal shared experience among people, and of course, to different degrees, and of course, also with queer people, gender expansive people. There
Absolutely.
are lots of experiences with masking. The thing with autism, though, and autism related masking is like there can be a real difference in a unmasked natural tendency for an autistic person. It can be really different from how they present socially. And autistic people tend to really need time to be unmasked and to be able to let their bodies do what they want to do. If they need to go nonverbal for a bit, if they need to kind of drop the more fluid affect and just like be really flat or whatever it is. It could be so many things for people. Like that can be such needed restoration. And I think
Mm.
that's a really particular experience of autistic masking.
So, would it help if therapists said, here you are free to unmask?
Yeah, that's a complex kind of issue. Because in some ways like that is a really helpful idea, yet also unmasking requires safety, emotional safety. So yeah, if there is the rapport and relationship there, that could be possible. I think it also depends on the therapist's sensitivity to what that might actually involve.
Uh-huh.
Because
Right.
unmasking is a process that often involves grieving because people are really coming to terms with like how much the masking has cost them. Um, and I think unmasking really deserves some sensitivity. So if the therapist can really support the client through that, I think that's best.
Uh-huh.
Rather than just kind of giving this kind of open invitation. I find it helps to give some options too, like maybe starting with like an invitation for someone to use as much or as little eye contact as they'd like, uh,
Right.
letting them know explicitly like that's not going to be judged or like pathologized.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think that's very important because I think a lot of trauma survivors have trouble with eye contact too.
there's so much overlap.
And, and the expectation that everybody's going to be full on eye contact just doesn't seem realistic.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah. hmm Could be like kind of kind of violent in a way to like force a skill onto somebody of like let's work on that. Um,
Right. Right. And
yeah,
that's the norm. That's right. That's the neurotypical,
yeah.
socially appropriate,
Mhm.
but mostly socially appropriate for therapists. I don't think the average person cares that much about
Right,
eye contact.
right, right. For me personally, I kind of like really model that for myself, just to kind of give permission. Like I kind of let my eyes wander when I talk, and I've had client conversations with clients just explicitly welcoming that. Um, and another way I've also found accommodations to be really supportive for some clients is like really accommodating their communication style. So I've had several autistic clients where actually a longer session and maybe less frequent just really fit for them better. So they can just dump all the info at first, get it all
Uh-huh.
out, and then we can kind of go deeper after that.
Oh, that's great. So flexibility.
hmm hmm
Right.
Yeah.
And, and really meeting the needs of the autistic client.
hmm
Yeah, as much as we can,
Yeah. Yeah.
and with hopefully with their collaboration.
Totally. Yeah. Accommodations that work for both therapist and client, because that's going to protect the therapeutic relationship if it works for the therapist as well. But also just really learning like, yeah, there are ways we can accommodate different access needs because that's part of this larger practice too, of like making this world a more inclusive and just place as well.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of the kinds of questions that I get asked.
hmm
And And I think if I think about it, most of them are about how do I get the client, again, I'm translating
Mhm.
just of how do I get the client to be more neurotypical?
Mhm. Yeah, totally. Hmm.
So I know
Hmm.
what to do.
Right, right. And
Right?
then more about the therapist.
So
Yeah,
I can be a helper. So the helper part gets
exactly. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
right.
The helper part can be so tricky and so sneaky.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Hmm.
But it helps be, well, I would think it would help you because you your helper part, well, I don't know. I'm making a generalization. Because maybe your helper part isn't as sophisticated as you are.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they really kind of narrow the lens for me, and then I'm not able to see as much nuance.
Right, right,
Hmm.
right. So that's really, I think that's an important message for for our listeners is that nuance is very important, and then we can't lose that
Absolutely.
just
Yeah.
because we have methods, we have TIST, we have EMDR, we have
Yeah.
huge, huge menu of methods
Yeah.
that are not nuance oriented.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that actually reminds me of the earlier questions about like supporting trans people as well. Like that just really fits for kind of both populations and kind of topics we've been exploring together. Like
Mhm.
nuance is so, so important to not impose stereotyping narratives on clients. And nuance comes with more exposure. So not only seeking out more trainings, but also like in everyday life, expanding one's community, getting to know other people in their actual lives, just to get more exposed to all the different ways transness, gender expansiveness, autism can manifest. There's just infinite ways. And yeah, the more people get exposed to, the more nuance they'll develop in understanding these experiences.
Right, right. Cool. Well, I like that. Thank you for bringing nuance to us.
I'm all about nuance.
I could see that. I could see that. Uh, and let me ask you, how how does TIST land for your autistic clients?
Mm, hmm. Hmm. I love this question. I love talking about TIST. Honestly, there are some clients who struggle with TIST. I think my sense is that they have such an innate tendency to be really concrete about things that kind of using a mindful approach to get in touch with things that might not be as visible at first or as clear. It tends to kind of land more like an intellectual exercise, I've noticed. I also, though, have clients who are autistic, um, who really take to the work too. I mean, it's just kind of like you said, like duck to water. Like it just really fits and they can really like make use of it and make it into a practice outside of therapy. So it ranges, I've found. So again, that's just another example of how we can't generalize.
Right, that's and let's remember that there are plenty of neurotypical people who have
Right,
trouble with a parts approach.
right, right.
So, so it it's actually I think there's a subgroup of clients who are really phobic about the whole the think about thinking in a parts way, using parts language.
Totally, totally. I'm just chuckling because it's so nice to hear you say that right now because I'm in the midst of that with someone. And yeah, it's just nice to be reminded.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I've also found the TIST approach could be really useful in supporting trans and gender expansive clients in that kind of really complex conundrum we were talking about earlier of like the ongoing threat and very real fears. Like in addition to the more practical needs, like also sometimes attending to what's present through a parts approach, um, could bring more spaciousness and resource inside. Of course, it's not in a way where it's about resolving, but it's like the parts of the client who need and can receive support get to have some connection with this kind of deeper, larger container or a really responsive, compassionate witness.
Right, right. Which certainly helps in an environment that's unsafe.
Yeah, yeah, right, right.
Yeah, very cool. I like that idea.
Mhm, mhm. It's- I'm
Yeah,
really trying to be guided by questions like how can how can we build support in a way with the time we have where the client can keep moving forward in spite of everything working against their thriving. Like, how can we use this time we've got to build support in that way, rather than how can we calm the client, regulate the client, get the client feeling better?
right, right. I like that. I like that because it's always felt to me like there's much more to what people's growth than processing emotions and memories.
Mhm, mhm. Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And, and unfortunately, it won't be the last hard time that we humans face.
Truly, truly, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And kind of with this conversation about like working towards making the world more just for people with disabilities, with divergent neurotypes, with gender expansiveness, with transness, like I'd really hope to encourage listeners to think more about how they're engaging in a larger movement of resistance because there are these coordinated and growing movements of attack that are once again being led and fueled by our president and administration and people in authority. And we really need a stronger and stronger coordinated movement in resistance. And so the more we get to know what the attacks are, the more it's going to inform our strategies as well. Um,
Right, 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 right. So encouraging people to feel that they're not just passive victims.
mhm.
They're 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 at risk, but they do have the power to resist.
Right. And especially for therapists, I would say, like really engaging in these larger movements is going to give them more of a framework and a lens of how this is all connected, how so much of the systemic issues that are the roots of intergenerational traumas and complex traumas, like they can all be connected to legacies of colonialism, like the many tendrils, like ableism, transphobia, fatphobia, racism, classism, white supremacy. So I've been just really reflecting on this and wanting to encourage listeners to think about how they participate in this larger movement, not just in therapy, but outside of therapy as well. And when people can really recognize how so many forms of systemic oppression are linked and interconnected in so many ways.
Right.
That's going to allow them to have a larger framework that's going to inform how they show up. And they're going to be able to provide a therapy space that's actually anti-oppressive and safe. And so many intergenerational traumas come from roots of these legacies of colonization. And so a therapy space that's really mindful of these roots and
Right.
is informed by decolonization and anti-oppressive frameworks, like that's going to be truly like healing and safe for people.
Right. Right. And I think, you know, I find that simply acknowledging that this is actually not a new time. This is this is a
Right,
replay
right. Yeah,
of
yeah,
centuries and centuries.
exactly.
Yes. Well, may we survive and hopefully thrive together.
Absolutely. Yeah. I do have a few resources I'd love to share. Would
Yes.
that, could that be something that's shared in like the show notes or something?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Go.
awesome. I'm just imagining for people who are in areas where there's like less maybe resources available, things like this could be supportive.
Oh, fantastic. That's
Awesome.
great. Thank you, Jon Lee,
Thank
for
you, Janina.
sharing your thoughts and your very deep thinking with all of us.
Oh, thank you. I'm forever learning, and this is just where I'm at now, but I know there's so much more ahead for me to understand.
Great. Well, let's all be forever learners then.
Absolutely.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
Janina, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.